But thank you everybody for joining us today. This is a really, really special session that we've got in line with Men's Health Week. I did want to highlight that while we really understand it's important to give women a platform to share their voices and their opinions, I think on this particular topic, it's really important that we kind of start the conversation for men to be able to talk about their mental health. And today we have 5 really amazing in their own right, really different men here who are bringing a lot of different stories, a lot of mental health journeys, and a lot of opinions on men's mental health to the table, so to speak, here. I won't be doing any of the introductions, but I'm going to hand over to David Pointon from the Men's Table, who is very experienced in conducting these kind of conversations, and much better placed to do this one than I am. So thank you very much to everyone for joining, and firstly, thank you very much for all of the men for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, on behalf of Prima and everybody else, thank you very much. So David, on that note, I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone and hand that over to you. So thank you very much and enjoy.
Great, thanks Sally, and hi again everyone, and thank you for the introduction, and also to Prima for hosting this fantastic event. Really looking forward to the conversation with you wonderful gentlemen and all of the people who are tuning in. So just to set the scene, Men's Table, who I'm a co-founder of, we focus on healthy men, healthy masculinities, and healthy communities. And so we pivoted that slightly today. We thought we'd have a conversation in sort of 3 parts, focused on healthy men. What does that look like? What are the panelists' experiences and views around that? Healthy masculinities, what does that mean? And how can we work toward that? And healthy workplaces. So we'll get into it in just a minute, and we'll work through those 3 themes in order, and I'll invite various of the panelists to comment. But we've also really, in our pre-session that we had a couple of weeks ago, thought we'll also just let some conversation erupt amongst us as well. And then I'll try and keep us on time and move us along. So firstly, I'd love to each of you just to take turns to introduce yourselves, just in sort of 60 to 90 seconds, something about yourself, and who you are, and maybe something about your background in relation to the topics we're leaning into. So let's go alphabetically. That'll be you, Darren.
Hi everyone, my name is Darren. I'm 28 years old. I'm currently in the construction industry as a quantity surveyor. I guess my background in terms of this is I'm just a normal guy, just want to just on a journey for his manhood, I guess, and just want to be a better man and potentially like a better husband, father, whatnot. So that's, in a nutshell, that's me as a 28-year-old. Yeah, I'm just a normal bloke. I'm just normal.
Thanks, Darren. Normal bloke dressed in very dapper clothing, might I say. Hats off to you. Get the award for best dress. No, the hands down.
Thanks.
David.
Yeah, sure. I'm David Westgate. Unlike Darren, I'm 64 years old. Spent my career building a successful career in advertising, and but throughout all of that time suffered from a mental illness known as bipolar 1, which is sometimes likened to a roller coaster ride in that it comes with suicidal lows, periods of great normality, and then the most amazing manic highs. And I guess the reason here is that I'm here today is because I went through all of that and never once put my hand up for help. Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. And already fantastic diversity of age and so on, background, but incredible authenticity that you've both shared straight off the bat. So thank you. I think that's what we've got in store today, is people, each of you sharing from the heart about your own lived experiences and so on. Jay, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I hope everyone can forgive me for a slightly corny intro, but I didn't want to do the normal spiel. I was more thinking about this in terms of this being about masculinity and men's mental health, that if I was thinking about introducing myself in that way, I've been a son to my mother and father for 41 years. I've been a brother to my only brother for 38 years. I've been a friend to my closest friend for about 35 years. And I've been a husband for 10 years, got to get that one right. And I've been a father to my kids for 3 years. So amongst that, I've had a career in clinical psychology and working in startups. And I now work looking after mental health ecosystems for a US company.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jay. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we started business introductions with that kind of an intro, just, who we are really, not the labels and the work we do necessarily. Thank you. And Will.
Yeah, thanks very much, David. And thank you, Jay. What a great introduction, because that is who we are. Those are our identities, our primary identities. My career identity is that I'm a psychotherapist. I work with, I'm in private practice, and I work with males and females, people either feeling a bit stuck or just wanting more from life, based in Sydney. I've not always been a psychotherapist. Through a walk through a dark night of the soul of my own, I reached a point in my career in corporate finance, and then as an executive, where that receding horizon of happiness, I'll be happy when, never arrived. And I had a bit of a midlife crisis and just decided that what I was doing and all the priorities I was running with weren't working for me, and I couldn't keep doing that. So I decided to step away, and I went back to university and restudied, and here I am as a psychotherapist. Looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for the invite. Thanks,
Will. Wonderful. And I'll take my 60 to 90 seconds as well, and maybe borrow from a few themes and threads and directions that you guys took. I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia. I was a very small statured young fella, and I was telling these guys 2 weeks ago, it was only when I got to year 12 that I moved up the line of height from the shortest person at the end of the line to go into class photos every year. Suddenly I was in the middle. It was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not the shortest anymore. I think what that led me to was feeling very wary and sort of underdone in my masculinity with other men. And as I became an adult, I actually had a lot of hesitancy and kind of barriers up in being open-hearted with other men in my relationships. And I fortunately just became part of the first men's table 10 years ago, where I've been able to sit with a group of men once a month for those 10 years, where we talk openly and honestly about our lives, the highs and the lows. And what that's really helped me to do is kind of have those barriers just dissolve away. And I feel like I can now connect with men much more from the heart, and some of those kind of fears and hesitations that I used to have, I definitely have felt have abated. So that's certainly been my personal journey through the men's table, and I now co-found that with Ben Hughes, and we're growing that organisation rapidly, including this morning when we were on ABC TV Breakfast News, and we've got a flood of new men interested in the program. Thanks, gents. And it's always great to start a webinar where you buy yourself time right up front. So we're according to our run sheet and our timing, we've got time in the bank. So this is nice. This is a good way to have spaciousness. And I hope that we can create that feel today, that even though we want to keep things moving along, let's take the time to breathe out. Let's reflect at times and just really inquire with each other. So whilst I'll play the role of sort of guiding us a little, feel free, as we've talked about already, for you guys to just pose the question, come in with an additional comment, even take the conversation on a tangent in whatever way you'd like, and let's trust that process. So let's lean in now to this first theme, healthy men. And I think each of you have something to say about this. The question originally that we explored was just sort of what gets in the way of men, remaining healthy and looking after their health. Maybe there's a toward question as well, what we can do to be supporting our health and so on. So I might just throw the proverbial talking piece into the middle, and one of you can pick up, so that we don't always have to follow the same alphabetical pattern, whoever's moved to speak first. Share us, a couple of minutes of reflections around healthy men.
I'm happy to kick off, being the oldest here. Point I'd make and obviously from personal experience, is when I was in my early 20s, I suffered from really, really black depressions. And at the urging of a really good aunt, I went off to see a psychiatrist, and I was just so disillusioned with the experience. that I did what only I think a fairly macho, naive young man could do. And I simply decided that I'd be better off handling my mental health by myself. And that's exactly what I did for 25 years. And it was the dumbest decision of my life. What I should have done straight off the bat was go, I don't like this psychiatrist. I think I'll find another one. And by not doing that, I lived a life. I've had a very fortunate life, but a very tough one too. And it could have been a hell of a lot easier if I'd only been smart enough to put my hand up.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, I can probably chime in off the back of that. I feel as though part of the thing that makes it challenging, not just for men, but for all of us, is that we've got this kind of simultaneous prerogative of needing to be resilient and at the same time being asked to put our hand up. And so I think the tension of how that plays out in your internal dialogue is, on the one hand, you've got this concept that you need to soldier on and keep pushing, and part of coping is minimizing some of the stress that you're under, telling yourself that you're okay, you can do it. And at the same time, you've got this invitation that's, you know, if you're fortunate enough to have well-meaning people in your life who are really offering that type of support and can take it on board, that they're there and saying, hey, why don't you put your hand up? And I think where I noticed this playing out for me is I think I've been fortunate in my life to not really suffer from any pervasive mental illness, but have definitely gone through periods of very high stress. And one of the most stressful periods of my life was heading into lockdown last year, when I was managing a company, and there was a lot of pressure both on the company, looking after staff, managing home life. And I recognize retrospectively that the only reason that I kind of probably got through that period is because I'd beforehand told people, if it looks like I'm stressed, please tell me, because I'm probably not going to recognize that myself. So I didn't mention at the time, but I've done a master's in clinical psychology. I've done a PhD in online mental health treatments. I should probably know when I'm hitting my stress limit. But what I have recognized over time is I'm not a particularly good barometer of my own stress. And I think it's because I've got that capacity, as, you know, hopefully most of us do, is like, you just keep going. And therefore I need somebody external to me to say, hey, you look really stressed, or you seem irritated, or hey, you haven't been sleeping for quite a long time. And that's the invitation for me to put my hand up, because I'm not particularly good at putting my hand up. Not because I don't think that I'm confident enough. I don't really have any problem with telling people that there's a problem. I'm lucky that I've got people in my life I can say that to, and they're not going to attack me in any way. But because there's this competing demand about surviving, really, and then recognizing when it's time to say, hey, I'm not surviving, I need some additional support.
Yeah, just to go off with you, Jay. For me, personally, I've been dealing with physical pain for 10 years. That was when I was a teenager, thought I was invincible, had an injury and just kept playing through the injury. And I got to a point where running became pretty painful, and I just had to stop. And because I was going through all this pain every day, just like, you know, like, you think you're invincible, you can just get on with it, you know. And I got to a point where I just started to go downhill really badly. That's when, like, I started to hit to the point where I was like, I was about to, like, just touching the lava on my face when I'm just in this pit. And then that's when I knew, like, I need to get help, because nothing is working from just being by myself. And I just need to get that help too, because, you know, you have people who know better and they can help you with that. So, and from there on, I just thought that, because I initiated that, raising my hand up, it's starting to get a lot easier for me, because, you know, I want to be a better person. I don't know how to be a better person or a better man. So why not just ask for help to be a better man or be a better person and get better? So, and that's exactly how your journey was. So yeah, that was cool.
Good point there, Darren, bringing attention to the physical. You know, and we've pretty well got our head wrapped around what it is to be physically healthy as men. We know that we need to be proactive, that we need to exercise, we need to go to the gym. Occasionally we need to see a doctor if we're less than well. But we have a pretty healthy relationship with our physical health and understanding that we need to be engaged in that process, proactive with it. But we are, as human beings, we are physical, mental and spiritual beings. And for some reason, we don't translate the same discourse from the physical well-being into the mental and the spiritual. We think that we just need to keep on going, soldier on. We'll be okay, push through, do it all ourselves, be self-reliant. And yet, we know that there are periods where we would benefit from checking in with others, whether that's professional help or good friends or just safe people. We also know that, in order to have continued high performance, often we need to tap into people who can help us optimize our mental and spiritual being as well as our physical. So I think for me, it's about shifting the conversation or using a lot of this, the same sort of concepts with our physical health around our psychological and spiritual health as well. And when I'm talking spiritual health, I'm not talking religion, although that is a part of spirituality, if that's what works for you. But philosophically, spirituality is about the pursuit of truth, love, and beauty. So that can be connecting with nature, meditating, yoga, simply being in beautiful or inspiring environments. But we need all of these inputs to feel rounded and well.
Just to follow up with that.
Oh, sorry, Darren.
Sorry, just to follow up with that, I think it's important for everyone, not just men, but everyone, men and women, to be in touch with themselves, because just finding that inner peace within themselves and not having to battle within themselves. If everyone find ways to make themselves happy by themselves, whatever that may be, I think they'll go a long way just by focusing themselves individually as individuals. So yeah. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, it's bang on with where I was going. I guess the first reflection from what I heard from a number of you was that sense of that sort of stoic male norm of, I need to do this on my own. I need to sort my shit out. I need to have my shit together. Excuse all the language, but that's the sort of self-talk that we're given. And I definitely inherited all of that as well. And I think also ran the race of, just soldiering on. Your story is very moving, David, of, 25 years between therapy and, and just trying to smash through it yourself. And that must have been, I imagine, a lot of pain in there. I'm curious to hear more from you. One of the things that I think stumbled upon, but I'm really grateful I did, was I became a regular daily meditator about 12 years ago now. And I just know that was a massive fork in the road for me in having more capacity and more tools and more awareness about what was going on. So it feeds into that spiritual dimension you talk about, Will, because in some ways meditation can literally be just a way to calm the mind and and relieve anxiety. But for me, it began a journey of spiritual seeking as well. So there was that dimension. But also, I think it gave me greater discernment about some of the self stories. And one of those is about, the narrative of being a man. I mean, Lavisha here has sent a question, why do men not open up about their feelings and emotions? And I think I was certainly stuck in this restrictive belief that, I've got to have it together and I can't show weakness. It was linked to that thing I said at the start. We see at the men's table, when men are in a safe environment and are invited to talk about what's really going on, it's a practice and they learn, but they become much better at it and much more comfortable to be able to do that. And what a relief it is for men who don't have that outlet. So just a couple of reflections, but throwing it open to others to continue the commentary for another sort of 5 or so minutes on this thread.
Could I just say something? I think we've got to understand, we think we're being stoic, we think we're being tough, we think we're not being burdens to other people by being tough and not reaching out. And quite honestly, I think it's the exact opposite. I think when we bottle these things up, when we allow ourselves to get unwell, we become burdens to other people. We become, whether that be, unpleasant or or just lifeless or whatever, we do become burdens to other people. And I know that's not the intent of anybody, but it's the reality of it. If you do bottle things up and you go, I'm just going to soldier on, that's what eventually happens. And the only other thing too is the irony of it is that it actually takes real strength to battle a mental health issue and get over it and stay with your life and do all of that. That takes strength. And we all go, oh, well, you'd be weak to reveal it or do anything about it. And it's the exact opposite. It's just sheer stupidity not to.
Yeah, it's a different kind of strength, isn't it?
Yeah, just to answer that question, why do men not open up about their feelings? I think there's a lot of guys out there who don't have that kind of support, being able to share their feelings, because I'm sure there's, like, if there are guys out there who have mates just talk about footy and, you know, just talk about guy stuff, you know, and I'm sure, like, having those conversations about opening up the feelings, the guys might not be willing to listen and that kind of stuff because it's like maybe too deep or something. So for me personally, I felt like I needed to find a group of people or a person being safe to share my feelings or my thoughts and whatnot. And I think just guys in general may want to consider finding those kind of people just willing to listen and willing to have those conversations, because they are quite tough, you know, especially when you're trying to share something really deep and personal. Some people may not handle it by just listening to that stuff, you know. So yeah, just to answer your question, thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind following up on that one. There's a couple more coming through, so thank you for others who've been sending that. I might start like just with a technical answer and then perhaps kind of look at what might be driving that question from Lavisha. So I think from a technical perspective about why men might not hide their feelings, and this is not just for men, it's for men and women. I think that really what we're facing in terms of research around this topic is our early childhood experiences around emotions, mostly with caregivers, lead us to develop really sophisticated strategies to essentially get rid of those feelings. And depending on what your childhood was like, you could have semi-adaptive ways of handling your feelings. Like my strategy that I mainly use to get rid of my feelings is I can turn them all into thinking, and then I never have to be in touch with any of the ugly feelings that I don't really want to feel, or get in touch with that horrendous existential dread that I think we tap into from time to time. If you had a different upbringing, you might kind of have other strategies, like, you know, it could be substances, or it could be something called repression. I won't go into the details, but there's tons of very sophisticated ways that we essentially over the course of the first probably 10 years of our life get rid of those emotions. And then we're asked to kind of bring them back up and be in touch with them. And then you've got to undo all of this stuff that you spent the first 10 years of your life building so that you can survive your childhood. So it's a very big ask. Not just for men, but for women as well, to kind of get rid of these strategies that we developed as kids, which is why it's so hard to do. I wonder whether what might be behind your question, Lavisha, is not just about why we don't do it, but how can we open up about our feelings? And I think it is what Darren's talking about. It's where is the environment that has enough psychological safety that you could start to talk to people in a way where those feelings aren't going to activate those old defenses that you needed. Or if you really need help, you might need to go and see someone like Will, who can help you to kind of do it professionally and kind of like work with someone to get rid of it. Or if you're lucky, you might have a friend or somebody who's safe enough to talk through and start to open up and learn how to act to do those parts. Also, just want to flag for David Pointon, we've got a couple of other questions on the Q&A and the chat.
Oh, good. Thank you, Jay. Great. Yep. Just a question, response, and building on this idea of safety. I mean, yeah, I'm a little biased because I'm the co-founder of the men's table, but we get to see, you know, we've now got 32 tables, and, you know, we did some research last year and asked men, you know, what's the experience of the tables? 95% of them said it's a safe place to be heard and to share. And we like, okay, so why is that? What's happening at the table that creates that feeling that it's safe? And we're pretty sure what it is. It's the focus on quality of listening. and the idea of men listening with each other without the intent to fix. So there's a guideline at the men's table that says no fixing. And you know what most men will confess to, and I think a lot of women as well, is they're hearing something from a person, and particularly if it's got emotional pain in it, if it's got trouble and trauma and disturbance in it, there's something like, oh, I just want to help relieve that pain. Have you thought about, or why don't you, or my brother-in-law did this, and it's all these gestures for fixing. And what it actually does is it diminishes the quality of the listening, because now the person who's listening is in their head and starting to turn, you know, into their story. And we're moved away from the person who originally shared what's really going on. So one of the things that we found in the men's table is that the more men learn to just be with the person sharing and really have the empathy and the compassion, but you know, fight that instinct to fix, the space opens up that feels safer, and it feels more like, yes, I can be heard here. So that's certainly one thing. And I think that's possible to create it outside of men's table in our relationships as well, you know, just in the way we're listening with each other and maybe asking to be heard as well. So that's one thing that's occurring to me as well about this questions of Lavicia's. Will, did you want to say anything more as we sort of move threads from this one into, you know, shortly into the healthy masculinities piece?
The only thing that came to mind, and so therefore I think it is worth sharing, is that when we're exploring how do we create that environment where men will open up, you know, the obvious thing that I recall, whether it's in my 20s or in my 30s, being out with mates, a few drinks under the belt, 2 o'clock in the morning, a little bit slurred, but all of a sudden really willing to open up and share some deep, dark secrets. And so what is it that, you know, alcohol removes that inhibition? What else can we do to remove that inhibition? It's not like we men aren't capable of doing this, but it needs to be in the right circumstance. And so, you know, we can do it.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we've sort of in a way morphed naturally toward this next topic around healthy masculinities and you know, the norms and the way we frame what it is to be a man. And there's a lot of talk in the media about the other side of it, you know, how not to be a good man, the bad behavior. What does healthy masculinities look like, and how can we be fostering these kinds of qualities that are more desirable qualities of being a man, do you think?
Well, let's define healthy masculinity, shall we? Like, to me personally, everything good about being a man. So, you know, as one example, he strives to be a positive impact to his community, you know, and being a loving father, a loving husband, wanting to take responsibilities, not because he has to, but because he wants to. And, you know, that's something to be admirable about. Admirable? I can't speak to it. Yeah, and just, I don't know, like just someone who looks out for you, especially when you know, you're just trying to find your own way, like as a little boy or a daughter sort of thing. Yeah, like the hero. Yeah, that's me.
I can add a couple of things in. I just also want to acknowledge some of the people who are putting through questions and things like that. I think we will do our best to kind of address some of them. We might not be able to address all of them because they're coming in. Just to the person who put through that they're going through a difficult time at the moment, I can definitely relate to what you described into the chat here. I'm not sure if it's going live out to everyone who is on the webinar as well. I think just to address your issue around it, it's, I think, part of the struggle, to tie this back into the webinar, that we might be faced with sometimes is that distinction between trying to live up to an ideal of masculinity and falling very far short of that, and then feeling as though you can get into some dark places if you're not kind of matching that bar. So for the person who is writing in, if you're really struggling, I'd definitely encourage you to reach out and try and take some of the impetus from this to see whether you can speak to a friend who might understand, or to reach out to a service if that's what would help you there. In terms of healthy masculinity, for me, I think what it is, I think what it's about is about a couple of things. So first of all, I think that it's about recognizing that there are some pretty extreme emotions that happen as part of being male, and I think that there's a good part about male integrity about recognizing like what is a feeling and what is acting on that feeling, and also that those feelings are okay. And I don't think that there's any feelings that are really off the table. I think especially, you know, be interested to hear from David about this. Is like, as you get older, I felt as though there's been a lot more opportunity to realize like all of the different things and urges and feelings that happen are really fine and welcome, but it's up to me to hold myself in my integrity and to not act on things and that is really about maleness, is about the integration and acceptance of those things, and then having the integrity not to act. And I feel as though that kind of, to me, represents part of my growth, although I'm sure that there's lots that others might want to add into this on the panel.
I think that's a really good point, Jay, and I actually find now like I'm happier within myself, not just because of having managed the mental health all that much better, but I feel a lot more in control of emotions and that sort of thing. And I also look at men I admire, at close friends and that sort of thing, and they're all people who can do that. I'm not saying bottle things, but who can control emotions, don't jump to anger, don't be judgmental behind people's back. And in my mind, it's maturity, and that sort of maturity comes from being, I think, a bit in touch emotionally, as well as just being, you know, the hard man. And they're the people I admire most, who can speak out, talk about things. And I'm not saying bare their souls all the time, but a genuine, feeling for other people and where they stand in, whether it's their friendships or their community or whatever.
David, if I can just ask you a follow-up question to that, I'd be interested in, how have you personally gone about that line between like not cutting off the emotion versus not acting on the emotion? Like, how do you manage that acceptance of the emotion?
In some ways, it's very difficult for me to answer, Jay, but I would say that when you're not travelling well, when you might be undergoing mental health issues, and anybody can, it's an equal opportunity employer, but one of your first things that tends to go is your perception. It's really difficult to see what's going on around you, to see yourself in context. And for me, I'd say it's probably only been really about 4 or 5 years ago that I came to a point that I went, I think I'm starting to get it. I think I'm starting to manage my life better with an illness, but also I get it, and I'm starting to be a better person. And, you know, it took me a long, long while, and I don't for a minute excuse myself because of a mental illness, but I do go, it was so, like, your perception had fallen so through. And that's just, to my mind, another reason why when men aren't feeling particularly well, why they should reach out. And it doesn't always have to be to another mate. It could be just professional help, seeking it, just as you would for a twisted ankle. But yeah, no great epiphany, Jay, just getting on top of a mental illness eventually.
One of the thoughts that comes to mind from my experience, Jay, to that question, I think it's a really important one, because there's also some questions here about how do we get rid of emotions and so forth. And I think, you know, your question points toward, well, maybe it's not getting rid of them. Maybe it's just learning how to be with them in a way that's constructive and in a way that's helpful. Some of the meditation practice and teaching I've had is essentially, meditation is really a form of learning to become a witness and an observer of the layers of the mind. And, you know, one of the lineages of thinking talks about thought, emotion, almost as one word, that emotion has got thoughts in it. The thoughts, in a way, trigger and cause the emotion. So they're kind of like a bundle. And that a meditation practice, in my experience, has allowed me to see more and feel more. Notice my body is triggered, you know, like anger, you know, is a classic example. the rush of endorphins, the feeling of that going through your body is there. And then with some practice, becoming more aware, okay, that is anger, but it doesn't mean then I have to do something with that energy or with that feeling. It's learning to have that distance or space between what's actually happening and what do I do with this, or how do I react? And I don't think that comes overnight, but that's certainly one response to the question you asked, David, that occurred to me.
Yeah, I would build on that. Part of the unhealthy definition of masculinity is that we're supposed to be unemotional, that emotions are irrational. And, as males, we are supposed to be rational. Well, the irony is that emotions assign value to our experiences. So if you like, they are a fundamental foundation of being rational, of putting our attention where we need to, just from a survival perspective. And so if we are trying to live a life that is based purely on survival without using our emotions as a gauge to help us work out what is valuable and what is not, then we're working with one arm tied behind our back. And the way I see this is that, we need to welcome all of our emotions. All emotions are welcome because they are all trying to help us to survive. Our biggest task then is to be able to understand what that emotion is trying to show to us, where it's trying to direct our focus and our attention, so that we can choose a constructive or a healthy way to express our action as a result of the feeling that we're having. And so anger, for example, without anger, we would be walked over, we would be annihilated, we would not exist. There are times when we have to use our anger to stand up for ourselves and defend our position. The challenge is to be able to express that anger in a way that is effective and influential and not harmful to the people around us. So with all of our feelings, they're all welcome. They're all very necessary to the human state. And we need to draw on them as turbochargers to help us live a full and complete and high caliber life. And they are rational. They help us make rational decisions.
Just conscious, as you've called out, Jay, there's some really good questions here. A couple of questions about being in relationship with another who either maybe isn't supporting or listening to us as much as we'd like, or maybe in another case, like the question here about how can I encourage my nephew to reach out to me, that it's okay to be not okay. So there's also questions here about, I've got someone else in my life who I'd like to be a supporter of, but maybe they're not ready, or maybe they're not giving signals that they're open. Any responses about all of what we're talking about here while we're being in relation with another?
I think for the part about how do you encourage somebody to reach out for help and let them know it's okay. I think the key ingredient for this is to realize that a lot of the time this is a long-term thing. It's not a like, hey, I show up and I say some wizardry. I think one of the myths about being a therapist is that, you somehow you train all this time and you have these magical words that you can just somehow, and everybody opens up and starts crying and everyone's happy and everyone's problems are fixed. I don't think that's really what this is about. I think what it's about is recognizing you don't have to have the perfect thing to say. You just have to show up enough times and be consistent enough to show the person that you care about them, because it's the behavior of showing up enough times consistently with a lot of openness and not trying to tell them what to do and not offering advice, but just saying, I'm here to listen, I'm here to accept who you are. I will help you if you ask for help on your terms. But if you do that enough times, then that's how the trust is built for them to open up. But that can sometimes take a very long time. And I think it's really important to recognize that there's an important line to think about is like, are you dealing with somebody where you just need to be endlessly open and patient and wait for them to come? Or is that person dealing with a mental health issue that may need a bit of extra support to get them into care? Because it's a tough call there where you don't want to just sit back for some people and say, hey, I can see that you're doing something which is dangerous or destructive to your health, yourself, and I'm here for you when you need you. I personally think that in some of those circumstances, you need to be a little bit more engaged and say, hey, I'm taking you to the GP, or we're getting on the call to book a therapy session now, or something like that. It's a grey area. I think, it's about being consistent, and it's about, I think, having some knowledge of what a real mental health issue is and when you need to be a bit more active.
Just to follow up with you, Joe, I think you're 100% correct, but just a question, like, what if you're leading by example? What if, so say you're having that nephew, he's not ready to talk or approach you, but you're with him and you want, maybe you will share your life, you know, just telling him your story, like, you know, like, hey, look, I've gone through this and that for a couple of years, you know, not just trying to resonate with him, but just showing your vulnerability, showing your story. Maybe he might be more inclined to open up, you know, just leading by example.
I think that's a great response, Darren, and I appreciate you bringing that level in, because I have really consistently heard from people about when they started to get better, and it's not usually the story where they say, oh, I found this great therapist. It's a story where they say, somebody told me about their own experience, and then it started from there. So I think you're right.
That's how I feel. Like, if I was just not ready to reach out, you know, I'm speaking to an old gentleman, he's just sharing his story. I think, you know, just understanding him and sort of like, oh, I'm starting to build more trust with him, and I'll be slightly more inclined to share a little bit and just do it by piecemeal. Yeah.
Darren, I reckon one of the words you use then is like a big answer to it is vulnerability. But when people who you look up to or admire, whether they be managers, friends, uncles, mates, or whatever, actually show that they have chinks in their armour, that could be hugely empowering for people. Going, whoa, you know, like, I feel like that sometimes too. And suddenly it's okay to be able to talk about it or feel that way, as opposed to going, I've got to be a man, I've got to be a man, I've got to be tough, I've got this armour on me.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I just realized my uncle is not Superman. I can,
yeah.
You know?
And yet in a way, he's even more of a Superman because he shared that with me.
Yeah, and that's probably related to Danny's comment here too, where, you know, he's lost his wife, his son's lost his mother, and you know, how much do I sort of encourage, I'm here to talk, juxtaposed against how much might he be able to share his own pain, his own grief, his own vulnerability of his experience as a catalyst or a gateway or a modeling to his son, to say, this is real for me too. This is what I'm going through.
Yeah, I think we're all human here. You know, we all go through life. I guess we're all like, you know, just we're in life together. You know, we're not like superheroes and whatnot. And you know, just showing that vulnerability. Everyone has their ups and downs. And I think that makes it real. So I think, you know, people won't be willing to share it because no one's perfect.
Gents, so just wanting to shift to our third theme here around healthy workplaces and you know, what contribution can men make to healthy workplace culture, and for men on the webinar who are, you know, perhaps feeling stuck or needing help, and their workplace maybe isn't so supportive. You know, what kind of experiences and insights have we got to share around the theme of healthy workplaces?
Well, I'll just pick up, maybe this segues into what Darren was talking about with, you know, you've got an uncle and he's showing he's vulnerable and all of that. I think the same goes for managers. There seems to be this really weird sort of belief that managers don't suffer from any of these sort of things, you know, like, but the people who report to them do. So we get trained to spot people and all of that. And it always seems quite amazing to me. Occasionally you'll hear of a workplace where somebody quite senior came out and goes, look, I've been through this, I've survived it, but I know what it's like. And the reaction in terms of culture to those places where they go, oh, exactly as Darren said, it's all right to be human here. I don't have, because what happens, I think, in a workplace where nobody in senior positions puts their hand up ever, there's a message straight through to the rest of everybody and going, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. It doesn't exist here.
Workplaces as a construct is an interesting idea, and I think we've tended to think of work as something that's toxic, that's hard, that's not good for us. But there's a huge body of evidence that shows that work is actually good for us, that it contributes to our identity, our sense of well-being, our socialization, of course, gives us economic benefit as well. And so, you know, I come from a perspective drawing on research of people like Jeffrey Pfeffer from Stanford, who see the need for workplaces to be psychologically safe. And once we can build that psychological safety into a workplace, then strategic outcomes are again turbocharged. They you know, are an abundance of triple bottom line delivery. People tap into, if they feel psychologically safe, they tap into innovation and creativity. They'll take risks within an appropriate risk appetite. They will perform above and beyond the position description. So the key here is how do we build psychological safety in the workplace? And there's a lot of bigger minds than mine who are specializing in this area and doing some really good work. And there needs to be some legislative, some structural, systemic guidelines around how this should look. But in the meantime, I like to simplify it down to a base level of humanity. And we men have a role to play here, because in the workplace, if we were to treat our work colleagues with the same value that we assign to our partners, our children, our parents, our siblings, our friends, and interact with them in a way that is psychologically safe. In other words, helping someone feel seen and heard and valued and safe in our presence, then they're far more likely to be engaged in their work and feel that they can contribute. Unfortunately, systemically, a lot of that toxic masculinity has been rewarded in the workplace. Aggression, pushing, you know, walking over others, getting what I need done at the expense of others. And so this is where we need this recalibration of what we're trying to construct within a workplace and how we go about doing what we're doing. It's culture, it's values, it's humanity, it's good leadership, it's soft skills, it's all of that combined. While we wait for legislation to say, basically, if you bully people in the workplace, we will, you know, fine you millions of dollars, which is what's beginning to happen. This should have happened decades ago. So in the meantime, I just keep hyping on, work from a place of humanity.
I think we're building on from that, you know, and what you said too, David. You know, being human, we all have issues. And Vikas has sort of asked the question, you know, are you the odd one out if you're always having issues? One of the things we see at the men's table, you know, men come from all walks of life, but also all levels of management and their career stage. And the most well put together man who's walking down the street where you go, well, he's got it together. You know, he's senior, he's got the big job, he's got the big house, whatever. He is just as likely to have, and you said before, it doesn't discriminate. He's just as likely to be having issues as anyone else. And the manager is just as likely to be having, you know, psychological challenges, emotional well-being issues as the people who work for them. And so being human is recognizing we are all going through this stuff, and it's these cycles. And, you know, in a men's table, we see everyone is going through cycles. And some have got more resources and more capabilities or strategies to deal with stuff, but everyone's going through these highs and lows. So I agree with you that I think the more we can recognize our inherent humanity and realize that no matter where you are on the organizational chart, you know, we all have stuff that we could share. And if we do share it, to the point you make, David, about not having to be the manager who's got it all together, but you know, being willing to show stuff that's like, hey, this is what's going on for me. That opens the door to create the safety and allow for others to walk through. In other words, for them to then start to share and talk more about what's going on for them. So I totally endorse what the two of you have said.
Just to kind of follow on from the legislation topic that Will, you were raising, I think part of what men can contribute to the workplace in terms of healthy masculinity is also recognizing that we're paid more on average, we're more likely to be in leadership positions, we're more likely to be sitting on boards. And since we're in that position, I think that there's a responsibility to some extent to look at policies that will change the balance from being just males in that position that's elevated on average to being men and women. But I think that probably does need to come from men because of the power imbalances that are already sitting there within the system. Change is slow. I think it's quicker. I think if we can recognize that those imbalances exist and that they will be remedied a lot more quickly if we can help to facilitate that. I also just wanted to touch, I'm really struck by some of the comments that are coming through, and thank you for those of you who are sending them through. Sorry we haven't gotten to everything, but there's a lot of people who are sending through comments around really wanting to reach out and be there for other people, which I think is wonderful. I also recognize how hard it is to do that sometimes, especially if you haven't had much experience with how to do that. I think a lot of the people on the panel, with the exception perhaps of Darren, we've gone through training to be able to do that. And so I think if you're looking for ways to be able to open up and connect with people that you care about, there are a few options. One option is that you can obviously, I'm putting my cards out on the table. I've got a huge bias towards this because I used to be a clinical psychologist, but that is what a therapist can do. And sometimes it takes a while to find a good clinician, but one of the roles that therapists can provide is you can come in with the other person and the therapist will facilitate how to do good communication, and that can break down the barriers really quickly. There's obviously resources like the men's table, which can facilitate that if it might be about just coming along with that person and having exposure to a psychologically safe environment, to take them out of an environment that might be unsafe and to show what it actually looks like, because some people may never have seen what it's like to be in a psychologically safe place where you can start to talk about these things. There's great resources in places like Beyond Blue. Beyond Blue's helpline is a really good place. Somebody put through a question about where do you go if you're feeling like you're about to, blow up, but you need to speak to someone to just get through that. The men's helpline is a great resource for that. Lifeline and the Beyond Blue line can also do the same thing. So there are resources out there. I think what I would encourage all of you who are saying, how do I reach out and connect? I think it's unfortunately about realizing is there is no easy answer and there's no 3-step process. It's usually about doing your own inner work to kind of realize where your own stuff sits. It's also about doing some training about, how you might want to do some mental health awareness training, or Lifeline does counsellor training, or you might want to look at some of the resources online to figure out how to do this. Or it might be about involving external support or facilitation through therapy and things like that. But thank you to all of you who have sent through this. I've just seen that there's a pretty strong theme about people who want to connect, but might not have the skills just yet to do that.
And often, Jay, it's by showing unqualified support. People just know that you're there. They can sense it. They can go, whether that's, pardon the cliche, but mateship or fatherhood or whatever, but knowing that even though they don't want to turn out and sit down and have that big discussion, but at some stage they may, and they know they can have it with you. That's an important thing.
Just reaching out, and I know it's very difficult to share some really deep stuff. It is very difficult, and it's very you're putting yourself in a position, you're very vulnerable and it's scary, but it's also courageous to share, especially to someone you just feel like you need to reach out, and you're doing yourself some good, just letting your truth out, or just letting things out just by speaking and having your thoughts leak out and not all bottled up sort of thing. So it's looking out.
Sorry to jump in, but that's an honor for somebody. Somebody reaches out to you like that. That's an absolute honor. That's a reflection of how you stand in their senses.
One last resource too is the Are You OK website's got some great language, some great questions, and also some instructions of where to next if you find yourself becoming an accidental counsellor, having this conversation with someone. So they've got some great resources there. Have a look through the website. Are You OK Day?
And while we're here, we should probably give Prima a plug. If you're a Prima customer, Prima will have resources for this as well. So if you're on here and you're a customer of Prima's, Prima will have resources for managers about how to lead teams around well-being. They have if you can call up and speak to people through Prima's line and get support around how do I have a conversation with somebody else, or I'm struggling to connect with my son. That's what Prima is there for, and that's the service that they offer as part of what they do.
And just on that too, I think there's a few comments about stigma associated with reaching out and the stigma associated with having weakness or having a mental health condition. And I think some of it may be true in as much as, because of the systems that we've got, insurance companies might have a bias against someone who's got a record or a documented mental health experience or something. But I think it's also the stigma's a lot to do with our own framing, the stigma that we impose on ourselves, that I'll be weak if I reach out. Whereas if we try and have a go, we'll more often than not be met with someone who is willing to receive us and isn't imposing a stigma on us. Oh, why are you calling me? Are you weak? No, that's not what happens. It's I'm here to receive, and I'm here to help. And sadly, in your situation, David, your first experience maybe didn't go so well in that 25 years before. But as you said, another way to go would be, all right, well, I'll just try someone else, and maybe it'll go better with a second attempt.
Yeah, don't ever, like Jay was talking about seeing psychologists, don't ever go, oh, I didn't like this guy. Oh, well, time to stop there. You wouldn't do it with getting your car serviced. You wouldn't go, I don't like this mechanic. You go and find another one. It's the same with professional help.
Yeah. So we're almost at the end, guys. I'd love to finish just with a less than a minute sort of summary comment, or just a key takeout, or maybe just something that you're really left with as an impression or a feeling about the conversation that we've had. So perhaps if we could just hear from each of you as we come toward the end, and maybe we'll just come back to an alphabetical order again, start as finish as we began. So Darren, would you mind kicking us off with just some impression as we finish off here?
I actually learned a lot just discussing with all you older gents, it's quite a privilege, and I don't know, I had fun just discussing about this stuff because I'm quite passionate about it, and I'm also part of the men's table as well, and I'm quite enjoying with the group of guys I'm with. And I actually reached out to one of the guys on my table, and I was having some relationship problems, and it's good to have someone to talk to and is willing to listen. So yeah, I'm just very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate to be around you gents online, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Darren. Real pleasure. David.
I'll just say this: if you don't feel particularly well, you don't feel like you're travelling well yourself, and it doesn't have to be a mental health issue, but just don't feel right, or you suspect a friend or a family member, just do something. Seriously, just sitting back and expecting things to, with a stiff upper lip or whatever, it's just madness. And I'm here to tell you from experience, but just do something. There's, a whole lot better life out there by seeking help.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Jay.
Two things for me. I think, thank you to Prima for hosting this, and also for David for chairing it. I think that one of the things for me, just from a mission perspective around mental health, is, wherever possible, that we all take the opportunity to start to talk about mental health in the same way as physical health, because the reality is that 1 in 2 of us are going to have a diagnosable mental illness. And for the rest of us in that 50% category, we're going to have a whole bunch of symptoms that looks awfully like having a mental illness. So to me, that means this happens to us at some stage of our life, some more than others. And so I think what we're facing as a cultural shift at the moment is for all of us to start to recognize that we want to have conversations about mental health in the same way that we have conversations about an illness or an injury, where there's no stigma involved about it, so that it's easier for us to all put our hand up and access care. The other part in this is that I've been really struck by the theme in the questions in the chat about people wanting to connect. And thank for all of those who have put in a question. I imagine that there's even more of you on the call who might be feeling similarly. And I really wish you all the best in doing that. I think it's a very noble thing. I hope you can take some small action on it to be able to connect with other people. And I hope that it's done in the knowledge that you don't have to say the perfect thing. It's probably just done in the spirit of showing up, and that will be enough.
Thanks, Jay. Will?
Yeah, very briefly. So a really smart guy 2,500 years ago by the name of Plato said, "Be kind to those you meet, for all are fighting a great battle." And he really highlighted the human condition. Life, being a human, is messy, and we are all going to stumble and graze our knees and break an arm along the way. So the key is to know when to reach out for support, when to ask, and to feel okay about that. You're not alone. We are not alone. We are all in this collectively. So, if we can continue these sorts of discussions, then we can chip away at any stigma that lingers.
Wonderful. From me, one of the themes that's even emerged in this last round here is the cycle of help seeking, or reaching out for help, and help giving. Being able to offer and provide support to others. And at the men's table, we say to men when they come, if you think this is all about what's in it for you, then it's probably not for you, because there's a place here for you to serve yourself. But the way a table works is you also serve the other men through your listening and through your presence. And I think there's something in that, because there will be times where we can only be help seekers, where we don't have anything to give someone else, but there are other times where we do. And I think it's the reciprocity and the opportunity to be generative in how we receive and give help in different relationships at different times. That's what was coming through for me as well. And I just want to say thank you to the panelists. It's been really a beautiful conversation, and so heartfelt and really honest. I've really loved the way you've each shared so personally, and it's been an incredible experience. And I've really enjoyed our pre-session warm-up as well, to get to know each other. So thank you. And I'll now pass back to Sally from Prima.
Thank you. I normally do a little bit of a spiel at the end of webinars, but I think I'll leave it today. I'm actually a little bit emotional. I just am so appreciative that all of you have taken the time to do this today, and your contribution is really, really important, not just today, but the things that you do in the industry, and I'm sure in your personal lives as well. So yeah, thank you so much. This was a really great session, and the recorded webinar will be sent out to everybody after this, and to those who couldn't make it, and I'll send it on to you guys as well. So on that note, thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.